little pivot towards the topic of transformation, and at Energy Resources of Australia, you sort of inherited, I would say, a crisis, a $1 billion cost blowout on the Ranger rehabilitation project. How do you think about transformation at times of crisis specifically?
For me, transformation is incredibly important, especially at times of crisis. You've got to remember that everyone in your organisation feels the complexity, they feel the pain, they feel the negativity, and that's not healthy for any organisation. So, as CEO, you've got to be able to set the tone, you've got to be able to communicate with clarity, and for me, we had to understand the nature of ERA, and ERA is a very complex organisation. It's heavily regulated uranium mining in a national park with shareholders that aren't agreeing, and so we the complexity grows leadership, and no better place than ERA to grow leadership. I think you've got to understand that you're the custodian of shareholders' funds, that you're also the custodian of stakeholder expectations, and that you've got to be able to navigate that with clarity. So you've got to reflect, you've got to work with the board, you've got to work with the stakeholders, you've got to have really courageous conversations about where you need the organisation to get to, because it was in no one's interest that ERA failed. It was in no one's interest that ERA didn't work out. So that wasn't an option for us. That was, we wanted to deliver world-class rehabilitation. We wanted to deliver a company that people can be proud of. And what we often lost in the noise around ERA is we're bringing a former uranium mine site back to a standard that it can be incorporated into a World Heritage National Park. And that standard has not been met anywhere in the country, let alone the world. And so, we're chasing this goal that's an incredible achievement. So we had to remember that through the corporate challenge, there was phenomenal rehab work happening, and for me that was also energising.
How do you see the crisis transformation being very different from a regular transformation?
I think in a crisis, you have a much stronger platform for change. In regular business as usual, creating a platform for change can be more difficult, and you've also got, I guess, more to protect. So if you've got a margin or a volume that the team thinks could be at risk under BAU, it's much harder to convince someone to do something different. Whereas if you're in a crisis, your visibility of both those margins and that volume, they're overtaken by the crisis kind of thinking. So I think a crisis is a much stronger starting point for change, but also much more impactful on people that you've got to remember as well.
I think in that specific instance where you had to trade off the cost blowout with the objectives and impact you were achieving, which were predominantly environmental and communal kind of impact, how were you thinking about the trade-offs there, trying to manage the cost but still achieving the objectives of the stakeholders?
For me, the ERA challenge is difficult in that you've got a very high stakeholder expectation of what rehabilitation will deliver, and you've got to help the stakeholders come through that journey to understand that it is a former mine site, and that's always a challenging conversation. It's usually a conversation about risk and where it will sit. I mean, we're chasing a standard that is safe and stable for 10,000 years, and none of us are going to be here in 10,000 years to judge that. So, how do we know that the work we're doing now is safe in 10,000 years? And that's always a challenging conversation. I think when we look at cost management, good cost management is critical to any organisation, whether they're in crisis or not. And so making sure that we've got clarity about the way we spend money and what we do it on, and that it's the right decision based on the information that you have, or the best information that you have at time. I think that's a helpful process to go through to help you understand that you're getting the best management of your cost environment. So for me, it was a lot about the people, but also I think good cost management survives cost blowouts, it survives upsides, it survives kind of even good management of organisations.
What do you think of your legacy to Australian corporate world and to Australia more broadly?
Yeah, it does feel a little bit young to be talking about a legacy. Look, I mean, I've been described as things like a trailblazer. We have a very small number of Indigenous people that are on ASX 300 boards. I would love to be able to normalise Indigenous people being in balance sheet roles and therefore being on boards. And I'd love to get to the point where that isn't a trailblazing article, that the work that we're doing is transforming companies, finding their growth pathway, using the world's oldest knowledge to find competitive advantage in today's world. So hopefully I can help grow a legacy that many more people normalise coming behind me to make their own ASX careers or make their own directorship careers, and that it's not a national article when they do.
I do believe that boards and the role of governance and the role of boards in the world of AI will have to become much stronger to govern all of these disruptions and these dominoes that you talked about. The responsibility for boards will just increase massively in that world.
Yeah, I do think the role of boards and role of governance is critical in the management of AI. I mean, there's been plenty of transformations. COVID's one of them, global financial crises, and now maybe AI is bigger than both combined. But it doesn't change the board's role. You've got to look after your shareholders or your owners. You've got to ensure that your customers are prepared to buy something from you or to get to be served from you. And you've got to be conscious of the broader community. The government, generally speaking, is a reflection of broader community sentiment, so around regulations. So I'm not sure that the role of the board changes, but the thinking of it definitely does. And that's not something boards have traditionally kind of had to do at such a rate. And I think there'll be some transformations in boardrooms, but the great thing is there isn't a board in the country that's not talking about kind of AI and its impact.
So we're living in times of huge disruptions, and I think it feels like the rate of change is just getting faster and faster all the time. AI, global supply chain disruptions, so many topics that no doubt are at the top of mind for many boards. What do you see are the gaps in the boards today, and what capabilities are very important in these times?
There wouldn't be a board in the country that's not talking about something like AI or generative AI. I think for me, I try to understand what AI is doing to the world and to the planet, and one description I quite like is it's collapsing the cost of cognitive thought. And so at the moment, if you want cognitive thought, you've got to pay generally a person a lot of money to bring cognitive thought, and AI is collapsing the cost of that. And so then you think about, well, what are the ramifications of collapsing the cost of cognitive thought? And I'm a little bit of an AI optimist. I mean, I come from a community that's heavily underserved by cognitive thought, and being able to deploy it in a way that's scalable and cheap, or cheaper, is one of the biggest opportunities for protection of culture, language, customs, laws, and health and education. And so, I'm in the optimist camp on AI. I think there are transitions we'll have to go through where we spend a lot of time thinking about something that may not necessarily need to be spent on that same topic at the moment. And so all boards are grappling with, if your organisation is kind of getting cognitive thought introduced in a new way than what it previously has, then it's got a lot of dominoes that have to kind of flow after that. And so I try not to boil the ocean and kind of and take each step as we go. But I think it's something that we as a board or as boards should embrace. We should work with, rather than I guess rally against or even hold a view about where it's going to go. I mean, it's the acceleration at the moment is probably the hardest thing to predict.